This podcast contains graphic adult language and content that you might be offended by. If you are sensitive to violence, drugs, murder, blood, bad accents, mutilation, or sex, poor story writing, frightening scenes, bad puns, or really just about anything else, then please turn this off right now.
Don't let the ghosts and the ghouls disturb you, darling.
Darling, the only ghoul in the house is you.
The brain is useless. We must find another brain.
Children of the night.
Whoever is bitten by a werewolf and lives becomes a werewolf himself.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Night Fears horror fiction podcast. My name is Jethro Arla. I'm your host, and I'm the guy who narrates this stuff, and the guy who writes a lot of this stuff. I have two stories today, and they're both pretty absurd, so I had a lot of fun writing them. I hope you have a lot of fun listening. Let's just say I have more taste for antiques than modern minimalism, and a sense of humor that's as subtle as a fart in a spacesuit. I was cruising through this crusty old estate sale, hunting for treasures that screamed, "I've seen better days," and nestled in between some delightfully gaudy vases and a taxidermied cat that looked like it had died mid-hiss, I spotted it. A pocket watch. Not just any pocket watch. This baby was the Rolex of relics, all golden and ornate like it was made for a king or a particularly fancy pirate. It even had some fancy Latin inscription on the back that probably translated to, "I'm too sexy for my shirt." $5 and it's yours, said Mrs. Dalton, the kind of old lady who probably knitted sweaters for her furniture. She was glancing at the watch uneasily, as if she wanted me to take it, but she also thought it might bite. Once I got it home, I couldn't wait to see if it ticked as good as it talked. The thing was colder than my ex's heart, and just as unpredictable. I pressed the little button on the top, maybe expecting a secret compartment with a love note or a map to hidden treasures. And what did I get? Jack shit. Great, a busted old timer, I thought, tossing it aside like last season's fashion. Later that day, while lying in bed and swiping relentlessly right on Tinder, I felt a weird vibe, like when you think your gym shorts are tight enough until you start squatting. I glanced at the watch. The hands had stopped. Well, that's a weird flex, but okay, I muttered and gave the button another push. Because if at first you don't succeed, you might just suck at it. And bam, the world hit the pause button. Outside, everything was frozen like a bad computer screen. A dog hung in midair, chasing a frisbee that was stuck in time. And a couple was caught in a kiss, which would have been romantic if his hand hadn't been halfway to second base. In my excitement, I stumbled outside in my boxers because who cares about fashion when you're the only one moving? Walking around, I couldn't help myself. I adjusted a jogger's path so we'd end up in a pond instead of on the pavement. I swapped a cyclist's water bottle with a beer because hydration is hydration, right? And at the park, where a mime was doing his thing, I just couldn't resist. I put a real box around him. This power trip was more intoxicating than an open bar at a wedding. But as I ventured further, reveling in my newfound godhood, I caught a flash in a car window. A reflection that shouldn't have been there because everything else was as still as the career prospects of an art history major. Yellow eyes with black slits watched me, slicing through the stillness. They moved, which was a big no-no in frozen time. Probably just a trick of the light, I reassured myself. because acknowledging a devil in the details was above my pay grade. So I did what any sane person would do. I ran back to my apartment, heart racing like a caffeinated hamster, and slammed the door. Outside, time resumed with the suddenness of an unmuted Zoom call, leaving me to ponder whether I was the king of the world or just a court gesture at the mercy of something much bigger. I looked at the watch again. Its ticking now a reminder of the weird shit that had just gone down. "What the hell are you?" I asked it, half expecting an answer, but all I got was the steady tick-tock, like it was laughing in the face of my sanity. "Well, joke's on you, watch, because my sanity packed up and left a long time ago, probably with my common sense and my last girlfriend. After my first spin with the world on pause, like a DJ scratching a record at a lame party, I figured I might as well make the most of this bizarre situation. The pocket watch was like that friend who's a bad influence but too fun to ignore. You know the type. Still calls you up at midnight to say there's a llama and a kiddie pool involved and somehow you end up in jail wearing a skirt. The next morning, fueled by curiosity and a potent cup of coffee that would wake the dead, or at least make them wish they were still dead, I gave that button another press. And just like that, the world froze again. My roommate, mid-bite into his cereal, looked like a budget mannequin challenge. I swiped at a spoonful, because hey, what are roommates if not to steal their Cinnamon Toast Crunch? Walking out into the street, it was like stepping into a photograph. A jogger suspended in the air like he was trying to impersonate Superman but failing miserably. And Mrs. Henderson's angry cat caught in mid-swat at a butterfly. Seriously though, if looks could kill, that butterfly was already in the afterlife sipping margaritas. I decided to have some more fun. I walked over to the bus stop where a guy was about to sit on a freshly painted bench. Classic. I moved his hand a few inches to the right so he'd discover the wet paint with his fingers instead of his new khakis. What'd you think I was gonna do, let him sit on it? I'm not a monster. Plus, watching him later would be like the blooper reel of a sitcom. Down at the coffee shop, the scene was ripe for mischief. I rearranged the patrons into a conga line. There was something beautifully poetic about seeing hipsters linked arm in arm, their expressions frozen in existential dread and caffeine withdrawal. After a bit of rearranging the world to my liking, because why not, I sauntered over to the park. The mime was still there, now actually trapped in the box I'd left him in last time. I tipped my imaginary hat to him. Finally, someone who appreciated my art. And as I turned to leave, I saw it again. Those damn yellow eyes with slits, gleaming from the bushes. This wasn't some booze-induced hallucination. Those eyes followed me, attached to a shadow that seemed to flicker like a bad TV signal. Heart pounding, I figured I should probably cut back on the horror movies, or at least stop eating cheese before bed. I pressed the button to unfreeze time, half expecting everything to spring back with comedic timing. As life jerked back into motion, I bolted, not stopping to see the aftermath of my pranks. Back in my apartment, with the door locked and the curtains tightly drawn, I held the watch up, squinting at it like it was a text from an ex at 2 a.m. that just says, hey. There was something more to this thing than met the eye. And not in a Transformers kind of way, more like I've accidentally summoned a voyeuristic demon kind of way. Great. What's worse than finding out your cool antique might have a demonic GPS tracker? Realizing you're too intrigued by its potential to throw it out. Like sticking around in a relationship because the sex is good, but she believes the earth is flat. That night, lying awake with the watch on my nightstand, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It wasn't the usual, I forgot to close my laptop and the NSA might be getting a free show vibe. This was a primal, creeping dread. And like any sensible adult with responsibilities, I shoved it down with the rest of my emotional baggage. I decided then and there, under the watchful gaze of those demonic eyes, that maybe, just maybe, I should use the watch again. After all, what's life without a little risk? Or in my case, apparently, a lot of risk, potentially with supernatural strings attached. I mean, if you're going to go out, might as well be in a blaze of glory, or whatever the hell this was going to be. With my new reality-bending wingman, the pocket watch, I decided to go full-on beast mode with my pranks, because let's face it, who needs maturity when you've got a device that stops time? It's like being the director of the world's most paused YouTube video, only with more confused cats and less buffering. I started my day with the usual, a hearty breakfast, all seasoned with the possibility of unleashing demonic hell on earth, over eggs that were as scrambled as my moral compass. I plotted my day. First stop, the gym, because if you're gonna mess with the fabric of time, you might as well have the biceps to back it up. At the gym, with the press of a watch, I froze everyone mid-rep. There was Chad perpetually taking a gym selfie. I moved his phone just a bit so he'd be capturing old Mr. Higgins on the rowing machine, who I posed staring back at him, holding his junk. That Instagram post would be hard to explain. I switched the heavyweights for foam duplicates I found in the Pilates room. Watching the confusion later would be a real workout. My abs getting a solid chuckle as these muscleheads puzzled over their sudden Hulk-like strength. As I left the gym, still snickering, I felt a chill. And not the oops I forgot my jacket kind, but the oh crap my soul might actually freeze kind. I glanced around, the streets were busy, time ticking away since I hadn't paused it yet. And then I saw it. No wait, I promised you no cliches. Let's say the Yellow Eyes decided to crash my personal party. They were peering at me from behind a newspaper a guy was reading on a nearby bench. The eyes blinked. Newspapers don't blink. Shit. Alright, game time. I hit the pause button on the watch. Time stopped. Newspaper guy froze. But those damn eyes. They moved closer, slinking toward me like a cat stalking a particularly stupid mouse. Me being the mouse in this poorly thought out metaphor. Heart pounding like a salsa rhythm, I did what any brave soul would do. I ran. Not my proudest moment, but I didn't sign up for demonic tag. I darted through the frozen city, dodging pigeons suspended in mid-flight and a street performer who was caught mid-juggle. His balls eerily still in the air. I'm not going to make a joke about that. I could, but I'm not going to. I'm better than that. I ducked into a coffee shop, a spot I usually liked for its caffeinated offerings and barista who looked like she belonged on a vintage pinup poster. But today was different. I pressed the button again to unfreeze time, hoping to shake off my shadowy follower. The hustle of the cafe resumed, lattes being frothed and the espresso machine hissing like my last date when I suggested we split the bill. I grabbed a coffee, my hands shaking not from the caffeine withdrawal but from fear. As I sipped the bitter brew, I realized this watch wasn't just a fun gadget. It was Pandora's box, and I had flung it wide open. What was I going to do? Call customer service support and say, "Hi, I'd like to return my demonic time-stopping watch. Yes, it is possessed. What's your return policy on eternal damnation?" The Yellow Eyes hadn't followed me inside. Maybe demons aren't into hipster coffee shops. Or perhaps it was just biding its time, waiting for me to play my next move in our game of supernatural chess. Either way, I had to figure out what this thing wanted from me before I ended up a footnote in a spooky campfire story. As I left the cafe, the watch heavy in my pocket, I knew one thing for sure. If I was going down, I wasn't going down quietly. I'd be the guy who went down with a bang, hopefully more of the fireworks kind and less of the hellfire kind. Alright, so bring it on, Shadow Stalker. Let's dance. Waking up after a day of dodging demons' side eyes makes you reconsider your life choices, especially when those choices involved haunted watches that stop time and apparently invite demons to the party. This morning, the dread hit harder than the realization you've texted a raunchy joke to your boss instead of your buddy. Armed with the deadliest weapon known to man, Google, I decided to dive into some research. Because, Googling demon problems is like WebMD. You always end up thinking you've got the worst case scenario. But in this case, I did. I typed in everything from time-stopping watches to creepy yellow-eyed stalkers, which surprisingly just pulled up a lot of cat pictures and a few too many ads for eye drops. At the bottom of page 10, I found an obscure blog detailing haunted artifacts. Bingo. According to the post, my Latin-inscribed gold-gleaming bad news bearer was known as the Chronos Keeper. Legend had it that this little gadget could not only stop time, but also was a demon's version of an Uber, summoning them to the mortal realm. Talk about service. I spent the next few hours digesting every scrap of cursed knowledge, which felt like cramming for the worst final exam ever. Apparently, the demon was bound to the watch, a guardian of sorts, ensuring its power wasn't abused. Oops. My use of the watch had basically been the equivalent of spamming the demon's inbox with invites to the world's dullest party, my daily life. Feeling like I needed more eyes on this, and preferably not demonic ones, I called my buddy Mark. Mark was the kind of guy who believed in conspiracy theories and probably had an aluminum foil hat stash somewhere, but he was also a whiz with weird. I briefed him over the phone, his responses ranging from, "Dude, that's epic," to, "You're not messing with me, right?" Armed with a half-baked plan that involved more bravery and stupidity than I usually liked, I set out to confront my follower. If this demon was going to chase me every time I hit pause, I figured I might as well face it head on. Like a band-aid on a hairy leg, quick and painful. The next time I pressed the button, I didn't run. I turned slowly as the world froze into eerie silence, and there it was, the demon, looming like a tax collector, just a little less friendly. Its yellow eyes glowed with intensity like nightclub lasers. "All right, big guy," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let's chat. You want the watch? Because it's been nothing but trouble since I got it." The demon shifted, its form blurring like a bad TV signal, then sharpening into something resembling a very tall, very angry goth kid who'd just been told black was out of fashion.
"The watch stays. However, you are expendable,"
it hissed, its voice like gravel and broken glass. It's not what you'd want on your motivational playlist. "Expendable? Dude, I haven't even peaked yet," I shot back, trying to keep the mood light. Because if you're going to potentially get dragged to hell, you might as well crack some jokes, right?
"Use the watch wisely, or pay the price. Each pause weakens the veil. Abuse it, and you're mine,"
it warned, then faded like my enthusiasm for this whole adventure. As the world snapped back to life, the gravity of my chat with the demon weighing on my shoulders like a backpack full of bricks, I couldn't help but laugh. Here I was, strapped to a demonic timepiece with the worst terms and conditions ever. And what's worse, there's no opt-out button. So, like any sane person who had just negotiated with Hell's customer service, I went to the bar. If I was going to be dealing with demons and time watches, I needed a drink, or 15. Because from here on out, every tick of that watch was a reminder that the next stop might be my last. So there I was, on the fast track to becoming demon kibble, all thanks to my trusty rusty time-stopping pocket watch. You might think this is where the hero buckles down, forms an epic plan, and saves the day. But I'm no hero. I'm just a guy with a haunted watch, a questionable sense of morals, and a sudden craving to make every moment count, preferably without spawning any more demonic entities. I woke up the day after my bar escapade feeling like my head had hosted a rock concert. Nothing like a hangover combined with demonic threats to really kickstart your day. Sitting at my kitchen table nursing a coffee that was about as effective as a band-aid on a severed limb, I made a decision. It was time to get serious. Well, as serious as a guy who once tried to microwave a metal bowl could get. I was going to use the watch, but this time I'd be smart about it. No more pranks, no more messing around. I was going to use it to do some good. And maybe that would put me on the demon's good side. If demons have good sides. First order of business, saving a kitten from a tree. Classic. Or cliche? Sure. But everyone loves a good kitten rescue story. I pressed the button, and as time halted, I strutted over to where the little furball was meowing like it was auditioning for Cats, the musical. Easy peasy. I lifted the kitten down to safety. One good deed down, hopefully enough to appease my supernatural stalker. Feeling a bit more confident, I decided to tackle something bigger. There was a bank robbery in progress downtown. I know because it was all over the news, and also I needed to pass that bank on my way to buy more aspirin. I paused time, walked into the bank, and just relocated the robbers' guns into a nearby trash can. I replaced the guns with bananas, because who doesn't appreciate a good old-fashioned banana gag? Although it was kind of iffy because I had to go across the street to the grocery store to get the bananas, it was a whole thing. But as I left the bank feeling like a bootleg superhero, I saw it. No, let's rephrase that. I caught those eerie yellow eyes in the reflection of a car window watching me with what I imagined was a mix of annoyance and begrudging respect. "Look, I'm trying here," I shouted at the reflection. "Good deeds and all that jazz." The demon emerged, its form flickering like a faulty neon sign. It towered over me, and for a moment I thought I saw what could pass for approval in those terrifying eyes.
Improvement, but the path to redemption is long.
It growled, its voice like gravel thrown in a blender.
Continue on this path, or suffer the consequences.
Got it. I think you mean, keep up the good work. Avoid eternal damnation. Classic Tuesday stuff, I said, trying not to sound like I was scared shitless. But the demon didn't laugh. I guess humor really was dead. As it vanished, leaving me alone with the frozen tableau of confused criminals and grateful bank customers, I pondered my next move. With great power comes great responsibility. A lesson I was learning the hard way, thanks to a pocket watch and a demon who had the bedside manner of a tax auditor. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I used the watch sparingly, helping where I could, avoiding the temptation to fall back into my old prankster ways. It was like walking a tightrope above a fiery pit. Fun, in a terrifying I could die at any moment kind of way. As I lay in bed one night, watching the second hand of the watch tick with a regularity that no longer filled me with dread, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I was getting the hang of this. The demon hadn't shown up in a while, which I took as a good sign. Either I was on my way to redemption or he had found someone else to haunt. So here's to life's unexpected twists. Haunted watches, demonic life coaches, and second chances. Maybe we all find our path, preferably without the need for supernatural intervention. But hey, if you do find a cursed antique, just remember, use it wisely, or you might just end up with more than you bargained for. And if all else fails, make sure you've got a good joke ready, because sometimes laughter is really the best defense. And that's my story. Relatively anticlimactic, but sometimes good endings are okay. Hey, I hope you enjoyed that story. This next one, I basically tried to write in as much toilet humor as I possibly could into one story, and this is the result. I hope you enjoy. Look, I've always been the type to take on any type of challenge thrown my way, especially if it involves free food. So when El Diablo Loco announced their Devil's Burrito Challenge, finish it and it's on the house, I was all in. I mean, how bad could it be? The place was buzzing that night, the air thick with anticipation and the sharp tang of jalapenos, or jalapenos if you're no fun. The crowd was a mix of thrill seekers and regulars, all craning their necks as the waitress brought out the burrito. This thing was a beast. A massive tortilla-wrapped monster that looked like it could feed a small family. It was loaded on 4 kinds of meat, beans, rice, cheese, and drenched in a sinister-looking sauce that gleamed under the neon lights. I dove in, each bite an explosion of heat and flavor. The crowd cheered, glasses clinked, and I fought through the scorching pain. Meat sweats mixed with actual sweats as I neared the end, my eyes watering, not just from pride, but from the sheer spice that assaulted my senses. With a final heroic gulp, I finished it. The crowd erupted, and I raised my fists in victory, the king of the burrito mountain. My stomach, though, was starting to protest, churning in ways that spelled doom. I ignored it, basking in my win, but as the night wore on, my victory felt more like a Pyrrhic conquest, meaning I had won, but at what cost? By the time I stumbled home, the burrito was staging a full-blown rebellion inside me. I barely made it to the bathroom, and what happened next was nothing short of apocalyptic. The expulsion was violent, a relentless torrent that seemed to echo off the porcelain with the fury of 1,000 suns. Amid the chaos, something shifted. Not just the contents of my bowels, but something else. As the storm subsided, I caught my breath, wiped the sweat from my brow, and peered into the bowl. There, amidst the wreckage, was something moving. A lump of shit, I guess. But it was unlike any turd I'd ever seen. It had tiny malformed limbs and was squirming like a newborn baby. "Hello, mate," it said in a low-pitched, gruff voice that for some confusing, incomprehensible reason had an accent. "Name's Carl. Thanks for the ride out, bud." I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet, my back slamming against the cool tile wall. This couldn't be happening. It had to be an hallucination, right? A spicy, food-induced nightmare? Carl climbed out of the toilet, his form grotesque. A dribbling, muck-covered abomination with eyes that seemed too aware. "You got any more food? I'm starving." He chuckled, a sound like gravel grinding on gravel. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I just watched in horror as he dragged his malformed body across the floor, leaving a trail of little brown spots with each step he took. "Where's the hospitality, mate?" Carl taunted, his voice dripping with mockery as he pulled himself onto the bathroom tiles. "Aren't you happy to see me?" My mind raced, panic setting in. This had to be a bad dream. It just had to be. But the cold, hard reality was staring me right in the face, smirking from the floor of my bathroom. The rest of the night was a blur. Carl followed me around like a puppy, his presence a constant reminder of the nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But he talked about life, the universe, and other crap, literally, as if he hadn't just emerged from my ass. The absurdity of it all was overwhelming. I was trapped in a horror show and my co-star a little demonic piece of shit with a twisted sense of humor. And as dawn crept through the curtains, casting a pale light into the room, I knew one thing for certain. My life was never going to be the same again. Let's get one thing straight. Having a walking, talking turd as a sidekick isn't all it's cracked up to be. Carl, that demented dump I somehow shat into existence, started making himself right at home. His antics, at first bizarrely amusing, quickly turned my life into a freak show on steroids, and I tried to keep the little freak on a leash, but Carl was a nightmare in his semi-solid form. "Let's paint the town brown," he'd cackle, waving his shitty limbs with disturbing enthusiasm. I slept in one morning and Carl wanted me to get up, so he dragged his stump of an arm across my upper lip. Before long, an overwhelming stink invaded my nostrils and I woke up gagging, stifling vomit. I chased him around the room, but he was surprisingly fast for being so small. He finally stopped and turned with his hands in the air, saying, "I surrender, Jakey Boo." I kicked him hard, like it was the last play of the Super Bowl and I needed a field goal for the W. He launched across the room, splattering against the wall, and slowly slid down until he ungracefully peeled off like wet Velcro and landed on the carpet. I thought I killed him, but after a moment of silence, he popped right back up, cheerful as ever, saying, "That was fun, Jakey. The world's first flying turd." "Well, probably not the first. I think you forgot about Spirit Airlines," I said. His ideas of fun were warped, vandalizing my neighbor's garden gnomes by smearing them with parts of himself or sending foul letters to my ex, signing my name with himself in an ungodly flourish. One night, things escalated beyond pranks. We were watching TV, or rather, I was trying to, and Carl was moaning about the snack shortage. During a commercial break, his voice sliced through the room's gloom.
Jake, you know what will be really fun?
What? I asked, not sure I wanted to know.
Paying a visit to your old boss. You said he was a prick, right? Let's give him a piece of your mind. Come on, Jakey, we're a team. It's me and you, like Tigger and Pooh.
I stared at him, the flickering TV light casting ghostly shadows across his malformed figure. The fuck, Carl? No. Just, no. Ignoring my protests, Carl hatched his own plan. It wasn't difficult to know where he'd been. His whole body was like a permanent marker, leaving a trail everywhere he went. It was disgusting and impossible to keep up with the cleaning. The next morning, I noticed a new trail that led behind the dryer in my laundry room. Confused, I looked behind it. The dryer vent leading outside had been disassembled, leaving a wide open hole just big enough for a living turd named Carl to crawl through. I walked outside and investigated. I followed his trail to the street, and all signs of him vanished. The little shit must have hitched a ride somehow. I went inside and flicked on the TV. I was immediately greeted by a news headline talking about a murder in my hometown. I heard something, turned around, and there's Carl, flicking bits of himself off his body like he's shedding confetti.
Well, that fuck won't be bothering you,
he said, a grotesque smirk in his tone if not on his face.
You should have heard it, Jake. Crying like a baby when he was dying, he did.
My boss had been found dead. His office a crime scene straight out of some kind of sick slasher film. They said he choked on an unidentified toxic substance, found smothered all over his desk and chair. The horror wasn't just from the act itself, but the disgusting realization that Carl had used parts of himself to do it. I confronted him. You know, that was a real shitty thing you did, Carl. My boss was a prick, yes, but he didn't deserve that, I said. Carl's beady little eyes focused on mine.
But you hated the guy, Jakey. You should be calling me the shit right now, not a piece of one.
The situation at home turned dire when Carl decided he didn't like our living arrangements.
Needs more flair,
he'd said. That manic turd took it upon himself to redesign my place by starting a fire in the living room. In seconds, the flames spread and engulfed everything. The blaze reflecting in Carl's gleeful gaze as he watched my world burn.
Oh, it's getting hot, Jakey,
he shouted. I don't really give a fuck if you're hot, Carl, I said.
Oh, he said hot, Carl. My life is complete.
Standing there watching firemen battle the inferno that was once my sanctuary, I felt the last bits of my sanity fraying. Carl was beside me, humming tunelessly, a monstrous lullaby for the chaos he'd created. But the worst was yet to come. The next victim was my ex-wife. Carl had snuck into her house and dragged himself across her bathroom floor. She walked into the bathroom at night and slipped on a slick of Carl's making, hitting her head on the toilet as she fell. The police report said there was excrement left on an open windowsill. The news of her death hit me like a truck. The crime scene was sickening. A bloody mess that once was the love of my life, taken out by a literal piece of shit. That was the final straw. My grief morphed into seething rage. You've gone too fucking far, Carl, I screamed at him, my voice filled with fury and despair. The little monster just lurked in the shadows, his presence a malignant stain on the remains of my life. I knew then what I had to do. Carl had to be stopped, no matter what the cost. If flushing him was what it took, then I was going to make damn sure he swirled down to the deepest sewers of hell where he belonged. I'd had it up to here with Carl's shit. The apartment was a smoldering ruin. My life was a fucking horror show, and all because of one sadistic turd with delusions of grandeur. Enough was enough. It was time for Carl to swirl away into the abyss of the city sewers. Plain and simple, you little shit. This ends tonight, I muttered to myself as I prepared the final showdown. The bathroom, the scene of his unholy birth, would be the battleground. I fortified the space, sealing potential escape routes with duct tape and lined the floor with plastic. No more slippery escapes for him. Carl, sensing perhaps that his reign of terror was in jeopardy, was nowhere to be seen. I baited the trap with a concoction a creature of his vile nature couldn't resist. A pungent mix of leftover taco meat and the last dregs of hot sauce, spiked heavily with laxatives. "Come out and play, Carl. Dinner served," I called. The bait in the center of the bathroom floor. And of course, he couldn't resist. The sick little fuck emerged from wherever he'd been hiding, his body undulating grotesquely as he approached the feast. "Trying to make peace, Jakey? A bit late for that, don't you think?" His voice was slick with mockery as he slurped up the tainted meal. I waited, every muscle tensed, as the laxatives began their work. Carl started to look uneasy, his movements sluggish. What did you do?" he gasped, his voice edged with panic. "Game over, Carl," I said, stepping forward with a plumber's plunger in hand. This was it, the moment to reclaim my life. He tried to scurry away, but the laxatives were hitting him hard now, sapping whatever strength the turd could muster. The laxatives were softening him. His semi-solid shape was starting to dissolve. With a grim determination, I scooped him up with a dustpan that I'd be throwing away later, and shoved him towards the toilet, his slippery, muck-ridden body offering little resistance. "You're going back to the shithole you came from," I shouted, adrenaline and rage fueling my actions. Carl flailed, squirmed, his body splattering against the porcelain bowl, a grotesque sound echoing off the tiles. "You can't do this. I'll come back." "What's wrong, Carl? You look a bit flushed." Because every horror story needs a corny tagline. Oh, speaking of corny, let's get back to Carl.
"You son of a bitch."
He kept protesting in panic, and I didn't let him finish. Cutting him off mid-sentence, I rammed him down with the plunger, sealing his fate with a forceful push.
"You haven't seen the last of me."
The flush was thunderous, but a sweet symphony to my ears.
Is it over, Jakey?
Carl's curses and screams faded into a gurgle as he spiraled down into the depths. His reign of terror washed away in a rush of water. Breathing heavily, I slumped against the bathroom wall, the plunger still in my hand. It was over. Finally fucking over. The relief was palpable, washing over me in waves. But as I sat there, spent and weary, a cold realization crept in. The nightmare had started with one bad decision, one cursed burrito. Who's to say it couldn't happen again? I stood up looking at the quiet, innocuous toilet. No signs of life, no sinister gurgles, just an ordinary bathroom. But the fear remained, a lingering dread that clung to the back of my mind. What if Carl found a way back? What if something else crawled out of the sewer, born from the same dark whimsy? Shaking off the paranoia, I knew I needed to move forward, to rebuild from the ashes of the chaos Carl had left behind. 1 week later, I heard a knock at my door. It was a gruff-looking police officer with gray hair and a mustache. When I asked how I could help him, he placed me under arrest. I asked what for, and he looked me up and down and grimaced in disgust. "We have eyewitness reports saying you were screaming at your boss when you were fired, saying, quote, 'I hope you eat shit and die.' And well, that's exactly what happened to him. And that same excrement was found all over your ex-wife's house after a suspicious incident resulting in her death. We found letters signed in your name in excrement. So we're taking you in, and we're gonna need a stool sample." Hey guys, thanks for listening. If you like what you hear and want to keep this podcast going, please subscribe, leave a rating, helps me out. And until next time, have sweet dreams. I love you guys. Bye.